Let's go back now to our top story this hour. 7 EU countries are threatening to veto the G7 price cap on Russian oil imports, while a proposed restriction on Moscow's gas is being ridiculed in the Western media as an unworkable joke. Well, let's now discuss this with Richard Werner, a professor of banking and finance at De Montfort University. Many thanks for joining us on the programme. It's lovely to see you. Richard, what's your take on the biggest ramifications of these price caps for Europe, and why exactly are several EU countries going against them?
Well, they can't agree. Some say this price that they're proposing as a cap is too high, and some say it's too low. Now, that's the trouble when bureaucrats or politicians decide they want to set prices. There used to be a time when, certainly in much of Europe, people were in favor of a market economy and market setting prices. But see how far we've come? It's now politicians and bureaucrats that want to set prices. Obviously, the European Commission has been very much in the business of intervening for many years, but things have really accelerated. It doesn't make much sense, and that's the trouble, So where do you set the price if you want to set a price cap? I think Russia is likely just to sit back, watch, and essentially continue what it's been doing, which is deliver raw materials, oil and gas to its customers at market prices, at prices that have been set by markets and then put into contracts. Sometimes some people get a discount, but essentially that's been the procedure. And I don't see why Russia should really be too concerned by this squabbling and actually political posturing going on in Europe, which just reveals their preference for the wholesale Sovietization of the European Union and the restriction of economic transactions that's reached Soviet proportions, really.
So to what extent would you say these European restrictions would be a destabilizing factor when it comes to the broader global energy markets?
Well, certainly I don't see any destabilization of Russia as a result. Russia has been a reliable partner delivering and supplying raw materials to its business partners. The problems that we've seen in Europe are entirely self-imposed by the Europeans on themselves. And that's what they're trying to do. Let's have some further European restrictions harming the European economy. I think on the global scale, the impact is going to be limited. Yes, of course, the biggest demanders, some of the biggest demanders and users, consumers of raw materials and energy in particular are in Europe. But, these artificial restrictions can't really move the market prices very much. So we'll just see the development, like in the Soviet Union, of several segmented markets. And where the markets are free, market prices will be set and determined by supply and demand.
Berlin will have to come up with an extra $25.8 billion before 2024 to cover the losses of the country's largest gas importer, Uniper. What's your assessment of that situation, which has led the German gas giant to the brink of bankruptcy over the culling of imports from long-term supplier Russia, especially considering that Moscow has said it's prepared to deliver the gas in full as long as it's bought at a fair price?
Precisely, exactly. So it is a shocking situation that needs to be analyzed more. And sadly, journalism in Europe has long ceased to exist. It would appear certainly in the mainstream traditional media, because one needs to analyze this. What's going on? Why are the German taxpayers forced to bail out these companies that are forced into bankruptcy because of political decisions, because of politicians and bureaucrats intervening in markets that were functioning quite well? And, the public is given the appearance in Western Europe that somehow, because Russia is bad, this is the story that's being put out, the Russians are cutting Europe off energy supplies. That's why things are bad and prices are going up and there's inflation. Well, the truth couldn't be further from it. It's a complete farce, entirely imposed by the European decision makers who sadly seem to just be very keen to do what America is telling them to do. And the situation is much easier for America because once again, as we already saw 2014-15, America is saying to Europe, okay, let's you guys impose sanctions on Russia and let's you guys in Europe restrict your economies while America is going to sit back and actually take a lot of European business, as has been going on for the last 7 years. So the real question is, how long will Europe, the European population and decision makers in Europe allow this US imposed devastation of the Western European economy to continue? Because it's entirely unnecessary and imposed from the outside and not from the East, it's from the West.
Been speaking to Richard Werner, Professor of Banking and Finance at De Montfort University in the UK. Many thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.